Welcome to the NBA Slate Breakdown Trade Edition. I'm Jason Gilbo. With me is Brent Hyden. Coming off of a pretty exciting night in the NBA, no fist fights, but we did have a bombshell of a trade that dropped.
Yeah, Woj just dropping like a nuclear bomb on the NBA with the Blake Griffin to Detroit Pistons trade. Like nobody saw that one coming. I mean, that's just absolutely crazy, and it's so crazy to me that in the NBA you can have a player that just signed a 5-year, $170 million contract in the offseason get traded 6 months later. It's just absolutely crazy, and it just goes to show you really have to be paying attention to the news on these things. I talk about it. It's been in the GPP article for the past week. Some Twitter handles that you need to be following and guys that you need to have like push notifications set for because it's going to be a wild and crazy deadline.
Yeah, I mean, you said, this is the first domino to fall here, especially on the Clippers, because now we're looking at probably two other trade targets on the Clippers to be moving here probably fairly soon.
Yeah, and there's lots of guys that are rumored to be moving, Tyreek Evans, DeAndre Jordan, Lou Williams, Rodney Hood, all kinds of guys that are rumored to be moving. So you just really had to pay close attention. And also something to keep in mind, because this came up with the Tyreek Evans thing last night where he ended up coming off the bench. There is especially this year, there is a very big difference between being available to play and active to actually playing. So just keep that in mind as we near the February 8th trade deadline and the All-Star break.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll jump into this first game here. And obviously we just had the John Wall news that he's going to miss quite a bit of time here. Wouldn't be surprised to see Washington make a move moving forward. But we'll start with the OKC side. Usual suspects here for me. I don't know how much I'll be paying up for Russell Westbrook, but I don't mind obviously you going with him. Like, Satoransky and Tim Frazier here. Like, I mean, good luck.
Yeah, we're talking about Westbrook, who's back to being Russ of last season, massive usage rates. Dude has over 70 fantasy points in back-to-back games, 64 in the game before that. If you want to play Russ, play Russ. Like, there's a bunch of stars and great spots on this slate. I wouldn't say no to playing him. So again, if you want to play Russ, there's no one that's going to be able to really guard him. So he's a fine option here. Interesting target to look at, I think, from this OKC side of things is going to be Paul George in an excellent spot against a Washington team that has historically struggled against wing players. George did a struggle in this matchup last time out. That being said, I do actually like him a significant amount here. Shot attempts have been solid for him. The other statistics have been solid for him. Something of note, and I have to give Kevin Pelton credit for posting this in an article a few days ago, but in the 10 games that Andre Robertson has missed, Georgia's steal rate drops to 2.3 steals per 100 plays. He's up over, I think it's like 3.8 per 100 whenever Robertson plays. So it might hurt his steals a little bit, but I mean, we're still talking about a guy that has 4.34 over the last 3 games. So he's a fine option here.
Yep. Definitely don't mind him. Steven Adams is the other guy that I'm looking at. 6,500 on DK. Once again, just a solid option. You can bank on him for about 30 fantasy points here. 12 and 10 last time out with 3 steals against Washington. And we've seen Washington really drop off against centers of late. They were pretty solid defensively earlier in the year, but last 10 games, 23rd in defensive efficiency. Like, Adams' cash game playable. I might look some other ways, though, in terms of upside.
Yeah, Washington, a team giving up 10.3 offensive rebounds per game on the season. Adams, one of the best offensive rebounding big men in the NBA. Absolutely excellent cash game option here. Price is up to a point where like he really just needs a massive game to pay off that salary. So I don't necessarily mind it in tournaments, but I think he's a much better cash game option.
Yeah, like if he fits in your tournament lineups and you can roll with him for sure. But like if you have an extra couple hundred, I know you're looking at Cantor. Like there's some other options in that range. Capella's only 500 more, so there's definitely some higher upside guys.
Yeah, there is, and Melo. If you want to use Melo, go for it. This game surprisingly, even without John Wall, projects to be somewhat close. Melo's price is pretty fair across the industry. So if you want a Melo, you can feel free to go there as well.
Yep. You have any interest in the bench guys here?
Not really. Like you could take a flyer on Raymond Felton at his price, but there's a ton of value on this slate already.
Yep. Move over to the Washington side. Obviously, without John Wall, we see Beal get a tremendous usage bump. We saw the ownership fairly high last time out, even GPPs. It was a smaller slate, but you expect Beal's ownership to be pretty high again tonight.
Yeah, and especially if like the game like log watchers are going to see that he put up 41 points, 12 rebounds, and 7 assists against OKC last time out. Without Robertson, obviously you expect him to be able to put up a solid outing here. Price is pretty elevated though; he's up to 8,400 on DraftKings, 79 on FanDuel. I do like him a little bit more there. You mentioned the usage; he's about 34% usage rate. He's a fine option. Like he has had big games without Wall. He has struggled in some games without Wall. I'm still averaging 1.09 fantasy points per minute without John Wall. So if you want to roll him out there, go for it. I think there's better options in tournaments though.
Yep, for sure. And we'll start Markieff Morris, fairly cheap. He's been playing really well, averaging 26 fantasy points for his last 5 games. Going up against Melo, like that's the one position really on the Thunder that I'm not too afraid of attacking.
Yeah, he's going to spend some time on Melo. It's interesting to note that the last time these teams played, and this has been a trend recently, like Markieff Morris has been closing at the 5. So it hasn't necessarily hurt his production. Rebounding numbers have been actually up in 3 of the last 4 games. Production's been there for him. He does actually see a usage boost without John Wall on the floor. So he's a guy like I think he may end up actually going overlooked, and he's a guy that I do have interest in from the Washington side of things. Satoransky and Frazier, both guys probably going to be popular options. They're going to split the minutes. They're going to split their usage and their roles. I still prefer Satoransky because he's a better scorer than Frazier. People might be chasing the 14 assist game from Frazier. Some of that came in garbage time, so I'm not necessarily chasing it. Like if history tells us anything over the season, Satoransky's generally been a better player without Wall. So he's the guy that I have the most interest in if you're wanting to target one of the starting guards.
Yeah, Mike Gallagher just tweeted out basically what Tim Frazier's garbage time stats were, and it was 8 of the 14 assists came in garbage time.
Yeah.
And I mean, 3 blocks, 1 steal, like pretty elevated stats from a guy that's really not known for that.
Yeah, and he had some decent games whenever Wall was out earlier this season and last year, I think, too. But, like, again, Satoransky is a better scorer, so I'd rather go there.
Any interest in Kelly Oubre or Otto Porter here?
Yeah, I mean either option if you want to go there. Oubre is the cheaper option, so I would probably lean there. Hasn't been outstanding over the past couple of games, but I mean he did have a stretch of some really solid outings here, and he does have a decent usage rate without Wall. It's about 23-24%. So he's another guy that you could look at in this game. Like again, we expect to stay close. We know OKC's defense is terrible without Robertson on the floor, so sure.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. Oubre, holy hell. Oubre is the guy that I'd rather go with just because really Porter, I mean, really hasn't flashed a ton of upside. Like, only difference between fantasy points is about 4 or 5 fantasy points per game over the last 5. Like, I'll take the cheaper option there.
Yeah, same here. Like, it is interesting to note, I did see a tweet yesterday, something about like Otto Porter, like had his best practice of the season and looked really, really good. Like he has been bothered by that hip for a majority of the season. So that's something to keep an eye on. But if you wanted to take a shot on him, you could.
I had my best pot of the season on Monday. Now I'm having an awful pot today. So
there you
go. Gortat's cheap, but I'm not going that direction. I mean, I know people play him at only 3,900 on FanDuel. He's 46 on DraftKings. The minutes just aren't there for him.
One of these days, Gortat's going to burn everybody by having a massive outing like he did against Brooklyn or something. If you want to go for it in tournaments, that's fine. But like, just don't risk your cash games on Marcin Gortat.
Yeah. Brooklyn and New York next, 215 total. Knicks favored by 5.5. Let's look at this Brooklyn side here first. Karis LeVert ruled out. Rondae Hollis-Jefferson ruled out. We got D'Angelo Russell back. all these guys kind of in the mid fives or low sixes or even cheaper. I don't mind the Brooklyn side for value. We've seen this Knicks defense really, really start to drop.
Yeah, can I get my hot take out of the way first?
Go for it.
All right, so I am wholeheartedly expecting to take a big, giant, massive L on this, but Jahlil Okafor is minimum salary on DraftKings, and he's 3,800 on FanDuel, and he is pretty much a lock in my lineups. Like, some of this may be reacting a little bit to the Minnesota game where he played 23, 24 minutes, put up 21 points, had 6 rebounds, looked fairly good in that game against the Knicks team that plays 2 traditional bigs most of the time, and with Brooklyn being without Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, like, I think there's a decent chance Jahlil Okafor plays a decent amount of minutes here. Like, they're not going to give run to Tyler Zeller, and they've been hesitant to give Jared Allen a bunch of minutes, so like they have to play a big, and I think it's going to be Jahlil Okafor, and I think he's like my value lock of the night here.
And we look at the Knicks, I mean, 5th most fantasy points allowed to centers over the last 10 games, 30th in defensive efficiency, like just a complete tailspin from what they were earlier in the year.
Yeah, like I think this is a spot where Okafor comes out and could put up like 24 to 30 fantasy points, which is pretty darn solid given his price.
Yep. DeMar Carroll's the other guy that I have some interest in here. A little bit of a down game against Minnesota, but I mean, 26% usage rate in that game, right around 30 minutes. Like, I don't expect him to, a couple blowouts here, I guess, over the last few ones, but should be in the lower 30s, mid 30s here. Should play some time at the 4 as well. Like, Carroll's a safe cash game option for me, and I think there's even tournament upside at that price.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think he's the other guy that I have the most interest in. Like, it's just really hard with this Nets team to kind of lock down on which guys are going to produce on a nightly basis, but you do expect Carroll to be one of those guys. So I don't mind using him in all formats. You mentioned the usage, which is fine. Like, he's not really hurt that much by Rondae being back Russell being back. And of course, he does have a little bit of a boost with Rondae and Karis LeVert being off the floor. So I do like him a decent amount. The rest of the guys, though, like the wings, like we're talking Allen Crabbe, Joe Harris, Nick Stauskas. I think Harris is a little bit interesting at 4,100. 31 minutes last game, his 10 field goal attempts in 3 straight outings. Ceiling seems to be basically like 24, 25 fantasy points. So you're not getting big games out of him. They're going to ride the hot hand. So if Stauskas comes in and starts playing really well, they're going to give him run. If Joe Harris is playing really well, they're going to give him run. If Allen Crabbe is playing really well, they're going to give him run. If you want to take a shot on any of the 3, go for it. I think Stauskas being the cheapest is probably the best tournament flyer. And of course, I think he has the higher ceiling. So that's probably where I would go with those guys. None of those guys outside of Carroll are cash game viable, though.
Yeah, definitely agree. Do you have any interest in the backcourt, like of Dinwiddie or Russell tonight? Russell set out the back-to-back. Probably should play around, my guess would be 20 to 25 minutes here.
It is a very intriguing price on Russell. I will say that. He's down to 4,800 on DraftKings. If you're playing large field tournaments, he's 4,700 FanDuel. If you're playing like really large field tournaments and playing a bunch of lineups, I think you can take a shot on Russell. Dinwiddie on FanDuel, I have interest in at 5,500. On DraftKings, that's a hard pass.
Yep, I agree with you. Moving on to the Knicks side of things, some of these guys are at decent price tags and like in comparisons to some of the other players in the round. And I don't know how popular the Knicks are going to be here tonight. Like, I think we can see some other stars kind of overshadow them. So like, a Porzingis, at his price is an intriguing spot. Same with Cantor and like Hardaway. Like, I don't mind these Knicks guys here.
Yeah, I wrote up Cantor in the GPP article. Like, this has been a troublesome spot for him, and 3 games he hasn't really produced that well against this team. One of those he only played 9 minutes. It was on a back-to-back. One game was a pretty big blowout, but I think he's still averaging. It's like 1.28 fantasy points per minute against the Nets this season. He just hasn't played a bunch of minutes against them. I think that changes tonight without Rondae Hollis-Jefferson. They're going to have to, they can't go small as much. So, and it's not a back-to-back. He is questionable because of his lips, and I think that's the funniest injury designation on FanDuel I've ever seen. He got hit in the mouth and had to get 7 stitches, but he should be good to go. I think we see a big game out of Cantor here. He's one of my favorite options. You mentioned Porzingis. Porzingis is averaging like almost 40 fantasy points in 24 minutes against the Nets. It's a good spot for him, and I think he's going to be rather unpopular. So if you're fading stars and going with a balanced lineup in tournaments, Porzingis is a very, very interesting option.
Yeah, and this is, we kind of mentioned like we've seen Porzingis' shot start to drop off, at times this year, but he's shot 54% from the field against Brooklyn this year. And you mentioned 24 minutes, like he's averaging 38 fantasy points in those 24 minutes. And a game stays close here, like we touched on the blowouts here. And at 8,100, like the potential with his blocks of late, like there could be a huge ceiling here.
Yeah, they're really good. So like I do really like him here.
Yep. Tim Hardaway Jr., I don't mind as well. Like the minutes are back. Usage has been fairly average over the last few games, but obviously a pretty decent spot. He's another one who's only averaged 23 fantasy points against him, but it was just the one game.
Yeah, I think he's a fine tournament option here, especially at his price. It's not quite up to where it probably should be. So I do like him a little bit, and he's like Hardaway Jr. and Courtney Lee are pretty much the only ones who can feel comfortable in their minutes, because with Jarrett Jack and Frank Ntilikina and Trey Burke, like they're just riding the hot hand at point guard. So I'd rather get my exposure to the bigs and to the Hardaway Juniors and Lees here as opposed to taking a shot on one of the point guards.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. The Trey Burke insertion into the rotation has completely muffled that up.
Yeah, if you wanted to take a GPP flyer on Trey Burke, go for it. But because we've seen the upside in limited minutes, so like it's there for him, and he's apparently playing with like a purpose. So if you wanted to go there in tournaments, you could.
Yep. Minnesota, Toronto, Minnesota on the back-to-back here. Traveling to Toronto, I'm not a huge fan of Minnesota tonight, just mainly because the prices. Also, the matchup really isn't that intriguing to me. For me, they're probably just going to be tournament guys. If you're looking at like Karl-Anthony Towns and Jimmy Butler.
Yeah, and it's not a terrible matchup for Karl-Anthony Towns. Like if you just kind of look at it, like the Raptors have really been bad against centers of late. They're 26th in defensive efficiency over the last 10 games, giving up a decent amount of points in the paint and second chance points. Tournament flyer on Towns is fine. It's always going to be Jimmy Butler and Karl-Anthony Towns for me when the Wolves are healthy for the most part. So if you wanted to use either one, go for it. I don't necessarily like the spot for Butler, especially on a back-to-back coming from Atlanta to Toronto. So kind of a tough spot for those guys. Not really interested in anyone else from the Minnesota side of things, unless an injury happens to, like, if maybe they rule out Jeff Teague because it's a back-to-back and they want to, they don't want to risk his ankle or whatever, but maybe Tyus Jones if that happens. But like they adjusted his price up to 4,400, so that's probably a pass.
Yeah. You don't want to play the Wiggins in Canada narrative? Yeah, I don't know how much exposure I'll get to Minnesota. Like you mentioned, it's just Jeff Teague, like banged up, didn't look great. Taj Gibson in a fairly tough matchup against Serge. Like I'll go some other directions. It's a full slate tonight. Like I don't need to be focused in on Minnesota.
Yeah, you don't really need to, no.
On the Toronto side, though, I do have a lot of interest in some of these guys, and especially Kyle Lowry at his price. Obviously, blowout hurt him last time against the Lakers. He only played 26 minutes. Was a letdown against Utah, letdown against Atlanta, but obviously a huge ceiling here against Minnesota last time out. But we look at Minnesota; they've just been getting crushed by point guards lately.
Yeah, I put him in the tournament article. I think he's an excellent option, especially at that price. He's 7,400 on DraftKings. I think he's right around the same price on FanDuel as well.
Yeah, 77.
That's a really good price for him. And something that I kind of talked about in the GPP article is like the fact that Jimmy Butler is probably going to spend most of the time guarding DeMar DeRozan. Offense has to kind of funnel into other places, and you would expect extra shot attempts for Lowry here. And you mentioned Minnesota getting crushed by point guards, 30th in defensive efficiency over the last 10 games. That was prior to last night's game where they gave up, 40 fantasy points to Dennis Schroeder. I love Kyle Lowry in the spot. And I think because of how roster construction is going to shake out tonight, I think he goes overlooked here. I'm going to be, he's going to be a core guy for me.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Like, he's going to be a guy that I probably plug into most of my lineups just because of that price. Like, he's going to fit in. He's in that next tier down, but has the same upside as some of those guys that are a little bit higher. You mentioned DeRozan. Like, not really looking at him tonight. We see Minnesota struggle of late, but that's probably because Butler's been off the floor for a few games. So I think I'd rather go Lowry here. I don't mind Serge Ibaka in what's perceived as a tough matchup as well.
Yeah, I think Ibaka is okay. Like, going back to Lowry one real quick, because I do want to kind of hit on this, and I think I covered it in the GPP article, but like the games where he's been really bad, where he struggled, he hasn't shot the ball very well. Utah shot 2 of 14, Atlanta 3 of 10. The Timberwolves over the last 10 games are allowing point guards to shoot 54.5% from the floor, 48.1% from three-point range. This is a massive spot for Lowry. So, yeah, just wanted to get that out of the way. You mentioned Serge Ibaka, kind of a price and force play there at 5K. I think he's a solid cash game option, not a ceiling, not a tournament option, though, because you just don't have a massive ceiling for him there. DeMar DeRozan in tournaments, go for it. Not a guy that I'm really looking at his price. I don't know what to do with Jonas Valanciunas. Like, I'm so tired of fading Jonas Valanciunas and getting crushed for it. But I just can't. I can't use Jonas Valanciunas in cash games at his knowing that he's only going to play 24, 27 minutes. But in tournaments, if you want to go there, this dude, 27 minutes, 60 fantasy points. He has upside for tournaments, but I just can't use him in cash games. I just can't go there.
Yeah, I can't either. You can't. There's 3 centers in the East that you can really use in cash. So I don't mind him in GPPs. His price has come up a little bit, but deservingly so, of course, because he's scored over 120 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So it is a good spot. Obviously, you worry about the foul trouble with Cat. That happened last time out. He only played 11 minutes, got into some early foul trouble, but I don't mind taking a shot in GPPs because that upside is there.
Yeah, upside. He's got a 60 fantasy point upside. Just let it be known that he's probably not going to play more than 27 minutes, and he's going to have to produce a lot in limited minutes. But the matchup is there for him.
I don't really have much interest in the bench guys here. Do you?
No, not really.
I'm not chasing the Fred VanVleet here.
He may not even play. He's away from the team. Wife just gave birth, so.
That's right. After the big game, nice. We didn't play the baby narrative.
There you go.
That's it for Toronto here. Let's move on. Sacramento and New Orleans. Start with the Sacramento side. Once again, lots of questionables, lots of doubtfuls. That's going to be pretty much the case all season long for Sacramento.
Yeah. We do know that Willie Cauley-Stein will not play tonight. We know Skal Labissière is questionable, and Frank Mason is out, and Malachi Richardson is questionable. Garrett Temple is questionable, and every other old person on that team is questionable.
What's Randolph? I'm seeing doubtful for tonight.
I think people are listing him as doubtful because they expect him to rest because he played last game. But with Skal Labissière or with Willie Cauley-Stein being out, I don't know if Randolph actually does rest.
Yeah, because they only have 3 healthy bigs right now.
They have Papianis, Costa Koufis, Randolph, and Skal. Yeah.
So definitely could be a limited situation. I don't know how much I love diving into the Sacramento front court tonight. I do like De'Aaron Fox though.
Yeah, I guess on the front court situation, Skal is a great play if he suits up. He's been bothered by a shoulder strain, but when the minutes have been there for him, the production has been there. I mean, we're talking 23, 29, 29 minutes over 3 of the last 4 games, 31, 32, 24 fantasy points. If he suits up, I love the matchup for him. If Randolph plays, it's a good spot for him. You would expect him to play a decent amount of minutes against Anthony Davis. New Orleans doesn't have the ability to run 2 bigs that frequently now, so that could mean limited minutes for one of those guys. So we just kind of have to wait and see on them. You mentioned De'Aaron Fox. I do love the spot here for him. Coming off a solid outing against San Antonio, he's been over 30 fantasy points and 4 of the last 10 games. Kind of ceiling caps out around 32, 35 fantasy points, but at that price range, like I do feel pretty comfortable in using him in this matchup.
Yeah, I do too. And you look at the shooting guard spot. We've seen Buddy Hield play really well of late. We've seen Bogdanovich kind of drop off. Bogdanovich was extremely expensive kind of for him, recently. At a similar price now, like, are you splitting hairs between the two? Because I kind of like Bogdanovich here, while maybe others would be chasing Hield.
I think you can use either one. I don't necessarily mind using Bogdanovich here. Like, I mean, he's coming off 2 of his last 4 games have been pretty down, but like he didn't shoot very well in those outings. But
pretty
like
rough matchups too. Spurs, Miami last 2.
Yeah. So like he's fine. Like I actually do kind of like the spot for him, especially if we see like Garrett Temple or Vince Carter rest or George Hill sit out. You could get more like ball handling minutes for Bogdanovich. It is a revenge game for Buddy Hield, so there is that. He could pop off at any given time. I do like him more if Zach Randolph sits and if Buddy Hield comes off the bench. I've mentioned it several times before. Hield much better off the bench. We probably won't know ahead of time who's going to be in the starting lineup, though. So if you want to take a shot on either one, go for it. I think Bogdanovich is probably the safer option. Hield has a decent amount of upside in the matchup, though.
Yeah, it definitely does. Like, you're playing Bogdanovich a little bit, probably more for the minutes. They've just been a little bit safer.
Yeah, and he does kind of contribute a little bit more. Like, he does kind of get a few more assists and things like that.
Yep. Anyone else from Sacramento you want to talk about?
No, not right now.
New Orleans here, obviously, without DeMarcus Cousins, it's going to be a lot of Anthony Davis, but sites have priced up Anthony Davis to a pretty high amount here. He's 12.5 on FanDuel. Over on DraftKings, he is
11.4.
11.4. 11.4 is still not bad for Davis without Cousins.
Yeah, 11.4 is still too cheap for the production that he can put up without Cousins, especially in a matchup against the Kings, who one of the worst teams in the NBA against opposing centers. I do absolutely love Anthony Davis in this matchup. He's going to be extremely popular. I think using him and another star is a viable strategy for cash games. If you want to roll him out in tournaments, go for it. Again, I think he's going to be very popular, though. There's a path to him failing because it's Anthony Davis and he could get hurt, but there's also like a massive ceiling in this matchup. So it's like Westbrook and Harden and all these other guys. If you want to roll them out there, go for it. They're all great options. There's not really an argument against using any of them.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think like 12.5 on FanDuel, if you're playing over on FanDuel, that's a little bit of a steep price. Like, you're going to need a massive, massive ceiling game to pay that off. And when like LaMarcus Aldridge in a good spot, like with Porzingis in a good spot for 3 or 4K cheaper, and then I can go balance and maybe try and get some Drew Holiday exposure and go that route to still have some New Orleans guys. Like, I think that's a good tournament strategy tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about it countless times. I think using a balanced lineup in tournaments is a very, very solid strategy, because if the Anthony Davises and Russell Westbrooks and James Hardens don't put up, 70, 80 fantasy points, and they just have like 55, 60 fantasy point games, then like you're going to gain an edge. So you mentioned Drew Holiday. I wrote him up in the tournament article. I love Drew Holiday in the spot. I think it's important to note, like, he isn't someone that benefits from extra field goal attempts without DeMarcus Cousins on the floor, but he does have a massive usage rate of like 31%. Like, that's a pretty big increase for Drew Holiday, 1.39 fantasy points per minute. He's getting more assists. He's getting more rebounds. And against a Sacramento team that really, really sucks against shooting guards, and spot up shooters and pick and roll ball handlers. Yeah, I love Drew Holiday in this matchup, and I don't care about the price increase.
I don't either. When you put, what Sacramento struggles against, it's D, all of the above.
Basically. I mean, yeah. They're okay against isolation.
Yeah, they're okay. They're adequate, yeah. I mean, the fantasy points are starting to flow against the Kings. Like, we look at kind of earlier this year, like it was such a slow paced game that was kind of it made things unappealing. We look of late, like Sacramento's 30th in defensive efficiency against shooting guards, fourth most fantasy points allowed over the last 10 games. Obviously, you go back to the history of DFS, like we've always targeted shooting guards against the Kings.
Yeah, it's just been a thing. So like he's a guy that I'm pretty much just locking in my lineup and moving on. Like, I mean, 37 minutes, 34 minutes, 43, 37, 37, 41, 45, 37, 38. Now I know there's a couple overtime games thrown in there, but like that's a lot of minutes. He's on the floor a ton. Like I said, rebounding, assist potential is there. Like he's 9 and 7 last game with 20 points. Yeah, give me Drew.
You target any of these value guys here, more so at the small forward positions?
It's really tough to trust any of them. Etuan Moore, Darius Miller, all guys that, could get some extra run. If you wanted to take a shot on any of them, go for it. Dante Cunningham is cheap. Got the start last game, 28 minutes. Started out pretty solid and then kind of tailed off towards the end of the game, but almost had a double. Like if he comes out and gets you 10 points and like 10 rebounds, which is entirely possible for him, and puts up like 25 fantasy points at his price, like that's a pretty good steal.
Yeah, it's not bad. The thing is, it's like if they were priced down like they were the other day, I'd be more inclined to take some chances on it, but like they're priced up a little bit.
Yeah, Cunningham's still cheap on DraftKings. The guys they're on FanDuel, they're pretty much priced out of consideration. I think Darius Miller, yeah, I think Moore would be the guy that I would use there, just because we know he has those ceiling games possible.
Yeah, it's true. And just with like Reggie Bullock in that range or Wes Johnson, like I'd rather probably go with them.
Yeah, I will note it is a Rajon Rondo revenge game.
Oh, dear God. He's the guy that, he's another one where he's been bad for each of his last 5-6 games, but good one against Boston. That was a revenge game. We looked prior, like, I don't know, he's had some upside games, but you just never know.
The only good game that Rondo has over his last 10 outings is the revenge game against Boston. And he does average like almost 1.3 fantasy points per minute with Cousins off the floor. So it's just minutes. Like his minutes have been very, very up and down. He shot 2 for 11 last time out. So if you want to take a flyer on Rondo, I would not say no.
Now we get to an interesting game here, Cleveland and Detroit. Look at the Cleveland side. It's interesting, obviously, the spread, like it was 2 this morning, jumped to 6, and it's still against, like, you look at what this Detroit team and what this roster is going to be tonight, and you're like, man, is Cleveland's defense that bad that they can't just be like double-digit favorites against this Pistons team?
Yes.
Yeah. Like if this was last year and this happened, like they'd be like 13, 14-point favorites.
Yeah, but they're not, and they're really bad. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I put it in the GPP article. I think they're giving up over the last 10 games a defensive rating of like 114. Obviously, that was bolstered by the 148 points they gave up against OKC, but they gave up 148 points.
Like, I thought that was against Blatt's All-Star team.
No, not quite. Not quite.
Cleveland and I don't know if their stars are going to be able to be completely needed. Like, we look at LeBron, he's only averaging 44 fantasy points over his last 5 games. Obviously, he has a high ceiling, but like I don't think we're going to see the big ceiling game. Like, I don't think LeBron's going to burn anyone tonight or like break the slate.
Probably not, but I mean, he still does have triple-double upside, and if you wanted to roll him out there, go for it. I think Kevin Love is the guy that I have the most interest in. He pretty much did what I expected him to last game, and that's kind of come out and actually torch the Pistons from three. Shot 66% on 6 attempts from three last game. 2011 double-double. He has double-doubles in 3 straight games. He's moved back to the powered forward position, so he's not going to have to battle against Andre Drummond. Limited minutes are always going to be a thing for him, but he's produced pretty well in back-to-back games in limited minutes. So I think Kevin Love is the guy that I have the most interest in from the Cleveland side of things. The rest of them are just guys. Like, I don't really want to – I'm not going to try to, project the Tristan Thompson game. Like, it's not a terrible matchup, but he's kind of priced out of consideration for me. Dwayne Wade is back, so that kind of hurts the ceiling of J.R. Smith. Isaiah Thomas is terrible. Yeah, I'm just not going there.
Yeah, I'm with you. Love the one thing that I used to love last game against Detroit, and I'm sitting there watching the fourth quarter, and I don't believe he got in until about 2 or 3 minutes left. And that was frustrating because great game. Like he was, he had 30 fantasy points entering the fourth. You were kind of hoping for that 40+ game from him. And it makes you think, like, is the 35 fantasy more kind of where he's going to sit most nights? I know obviously he's put up some bigger games of late. He had 2 great games against Golden State, but we haven't seen 30+ minutes a lot from him this year.
No, it's just not something that's going to happen this year. But I mean, we're talking probably 38, 40 fantasy point upside. He's 7,200 on DraftKings. That's a pretty fair price for that.
Yeah, I mean, he's now power forward eligible on FanDuel, so I like him. I like that now, and he's only $7K there.
Yeah, he's getting pretty close to the price and force plays there.
Yep. Let's move to Detroit. Obviously, the guys that are coming over are not going to be playing tonight. No Blake Griffin. The lineup that's going to be out there, it's going to be pretty brutal. I think we're going to see Reggie Bullock be pretty chalky on FanDuel because he's only 3,800 there. And it's not a knock. Reggie Bullock has been solid this year when he's given the opportunity.
Yeah, I actually put him in the tournament article, like, especially for FanDuel. I just don't care about his ownership. Like, he's a guy that I think has plenty of potential. He's an excellent offensive player, shooting really well over the last couple games, over 30 fantasy points in 2 straight. Even at 4,700 on DraftKings, like, that's still 30 fantasy points at 4,700. I'll take that. So I do like the spot for him. We do have to talk about the rest of the guys, though. Like, you're going to see Stanley Johnson probably get the start alongside Bullock and then Anthony Tolliver. Stanley Johnson's a fine option. He's really, really cheap over on DraftKings. What is he? 3,900. And on FanDuel, he is where is he on FanDuel? 43. So he's fine on both sides. Luke Kennard, solid usage rate with all these guys off the floor. It's about 27%. You can roll him out there in tournaments as well. I think all three of those guys are viable. Anthony Tolliver, I'm not going to chase the Anthony Tolliver 40-minute game. No, it's just not doing that. But the other 3 guys, like, I think you can use.
Yeah, definitely. That's about it though for me on Detroit. Like, I don't have any interest in Ish Smith at his price.
If you want to take a shot on Dwight Bikes, I think you can. Again, just a short rotation. He could get some extra minutes. I don't think Detroit can stay in this game, but I kind of wish they could because Drummond is averaging like 1.51 fantasy points per minute with all these guys off the floor. You could go there in tournaments. Like, the offense going to flow through him a little bit. He's an excellent passer this season. I definitely don't mind going there. Detroit in the last 3 outings is getting outscored by almost 26 points per game by Cleveland. Like, I don't like trying to predict blowouts, but there's a really good chance this game blows out unless LeBron sits or something.
Yeah, like I'm fine with using basically the wings that are there because they're going to have to play a ton of minutes, but I don't have much interest in Drummond at his price outside of if you're building a ton of GPP lineups because it's tough to stomach that price in the game that it could be over by mid-third.
Yeah, but it's also Cleveland, so it could like Detroit could win this game.
Yeah, I mean, they very well could. Oh my God, that would be an absolute that would set everything on fire in Cleveland.
Twitter will just go bonkers if Cleveland loses this game. Like, everyone will be like, blow up the Cavaliers, trade LeBron, trade Love, trade Thomas, blow everything up.
And they're going to look at Jason Tatum's game tape from last night and just be like, we want him.
Yeah. Everyone's going to be plugging the Kevin Love and LeBron James to Boston trade in their trade machine.
Oh, man. Yeah, and then somehow expect Brad Stevens in return.
Basically.
Let's move on here. Orlando and Houston, 222 total, highest total of the night. Houston favored by 12.5. Injury news here for Orlando. Aaron Gordon's questionable tonight. Obviously, we've had Vucevic, Jonathan Isaac, Terrence Ross all out for quite some time. This is a game that's interesting, obviously, because there's huge potential. But I do think this is also one where there's a little bit of blowout concern, especially if Gordon sits.
Yeah, it will make things a little bit interesting on the Orlando side of things. If Gordon sits, it's going to open up minutes for Mario Hezonja. Lord save me for Mario Hezonja chalk day. He's fine. You can definitely go there. You and I were kind of talking prior to recording. I think I do actually like Kim Birch in this spot. Like, I think this is a matchup where he actually could get extended run. Given the pace of this game, he would probably be my punt play over Mario Hezonja if Aaron Gordon sits tonight.
Yeah, I'm with you. Nice price tags on both sides. Looking at some of the other guys here, like Evan Fournier and Elfrid Payton, I'll take a shot on Elfrid Payton GPPs. Evan Fournier, I think I'm going to go other directions at his price.
Yeah, I think he's fine. Like in tournament options, like the Rockets do really struggle against spot up shooters, and Fournier has been shooting pretty well recently. Without Aaron Gordon on the floor, Elfrid Payton and Jonathan Simmons are two really interesting plays. Simmons, 27% usage rate without Aaron Gordon on the floor. I do really like him at his price now that he's back down like below 5K. Like, he's a very interesting option in this, especially in this matchup.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you look at a couple of games lately, his minutes should be back. He's had a couple of games where he's struggling and he's played limited minutes, but we look at the game Houston prior, like still dealing with the injury. Yeah, at his price, like especially on FanDuel where you get a roster two small forwards, I may punt small forward entirely on FanDuel.
It's a viable strategy today, that's for sure.
Yeah. That's pretty much it for Orlando for me. Like, even if Gordon plays, I don't have any interest at his price.
No, I don't really either.
On the Houston side of things, obviously in a great spot here against Orlando. Basically the same boat like with the rest of the guys. Although if Chris Paul, like he's banged up, isn't he?
Yeah, he's hurt. Trevor Ariza has already been ruled out. He's out the next 5 games. Chris Paul dealing with a groin injury, sat like the entire fourth quarter last game. Given the injury troubles that this team has had this season, I would be shocked if Chris Paul suits up. Like, I know he wants to play, but I think they're going to be very careful with him. If he plays, I think James Harden is still an excellent option. If Chris Paul doesn't play, give me all the freaking James Harden in this matchup. Like, give me all of it. 41.5% usage rate without Chris Paul on the floor, like 1.7 fantasy points per minute. Yeah, give me all that.
And then add in an extra scoop of matchup with Orlando, please.
Yeah, it's like that's the cherry on the top right there. So it is an absolute smash spot for James Harden if Chris Paul sits, and it's even a great spot for him even if Chris Paul plays. Like, I'm probably still going there.
Yeah, definitely. And if you don't want to play for Harden, Eric Gordon's right there. Eric Gordon on FanDuel at 5,400 is going to be a guy that I'm plugging into a ton of lineups, just given the fact that Ariza's out. Like, Gordon's going to see plenty of run anyway. And then if Paul's out, like, there's a little bit more to go around as well.
Yeah, I think Gordon's fine on FanDuel if Chris Paul plays. If Chris Paul sits, I think Gordon is an excellent play in all format or on all sites in all formats. Without Trevor Ariza, that should move Gerald Green back into the rotation. Yeah.
Like, I was looking last night, I was like, Gerald Green's back? All right, let's do this.
And for people who don't remember, I think Gerald Green his second game with the Rockets was against Orlando, 27.4 minutes, 41 fantasy points. He's especially like a good play if Chris Paul sits. I would not be shocked to see Gerald Green get the start if Chris Paul sits. But even without Chris Paul, like I do expect him to play a decent amount of minutes. Played 18 last game. I think there was, some blowout, obviously a little bit of a blowout in that game, but yeah. And he's back down to 4,800 on DraftKings. Yeah.
Yeah, he's
3,900. Whoo, boy.
You put him and Bullock in, you legit have 60 fantasy point upside between the two of them.
Yeah.
Like that's insane for, 8K together. Like that's nuts. And we saw Green, we saw Ariza lead pretty early in that game. Green came in, obviously, Houston was going to win that game, but he played 18 minutes against Phoenix.
Yeah.
So he's back. Clint Capella, interesting GPP option for me. Minutes are always kind of the thing with him, but I don't mind him in this spot.
Excellent matchup. You mentioned minutes. Obviously, that's a concern, but 1.12 fantasy points per minute without Ariza on the floor. Without Chris Paul, though, 1.26. Chris Paul sits. Clint Capella is going to find his way into my lineups.
For sure. But that's about it, though, for me. I'm not taking any guys like PJ Tucker or Ryan Anderson or Mbah a Moute here.
No, I mean, Mbah a Moute obviously played well whenever Ariza was suspended. But keep in mind, Gerald Green was also suspended in those two games. So, I don't know that the opportunity is going to be great for him. If you wanted to take a shot on either one, go for it. But they're Tucker's the cheaper option, so I'd probably go there.
Yep. Denver and San Antonio. Denver on a back-to-back. This is the lowest total of the night by far. I don't have a ton of interest on the Denver side here at their price tags. I guess I'm just fading Denver straight up tonight.
I'm not. I think there's a couple spots that we can look at here. Mason Plumlee is ruled out for this game, and they're going to start either Trey Lyles or Kenneth Faried. The Manimal is 3,200 on DraftKings.
Do we need more punt plays tonight?
No, not necessarily. He's 3,500 on FanDuel at power forward. It's just a little bit interesting. I do really like Trey Lyles in this matchup. Obviously, Spurs not a very appealing matchup, but I do kind of like him in the spots. So those would be two guys that you could look at. I'm always going to love Jamal Murray in tournaments. Saw him come out and actually put up a solid game against Boston. Only shot 5-11, but 14 points, 8 assists. It is a back-to-back, so that does concern me a little bit. So that's kind of where I'm leaning. An interesting fact, the Nuggets have not won a game in San Antonio since March 4th of 2012.
I'm curious to go back and look at that roster or that game in general and who played.
Yeah. I can probably go pull that up while you start talking about the San Antonio side, but that's just crazy. They have not won a game in San Antonio since March 4th of 2012.
Yeah, that's pretty nuts. But yeah, I'll move on to San Antonio here. I do like LaMarcus Aldridge. Like I was mentioning him with Porzingis and kind of going a balanced approach. Like he's still pretty pricey, but struggled last time out against Denver. Obviously, that game was a blowout as well. He only played 26 minutes. Cooled off a little bit of late. You kind of expected better games in Sacramento and Philly than what he put up. But 40, 50 plus upside here at his price. Like we look at Denver, they haven't been great against power forwards this season. Aldridge just kind of that step down if you don't want to pay for Davis.
Yeah, I definitely like Aldridge. Okay, so March 4th, 2012, Denver Nuggets beat the San Antonio Spurs 99-94. Nuggets starters, Ty Lawson, Aaron Aflalo, Corey Brewer, Kenneth Faried, Timofey Mozgov. Their bench was Al Harrington, Andre Miller, Birdman, Jordan Hamilton.
Dear God.
The Spurs starters, Tony Parker, Richard Jefferson, Tim Duncan, Danny Green, DeJuan Blair.
It takes me back playing Ty Lawson because Ty Lawson was one of the most tilting early DFS players of all time.
Yeah, it's crazy. Kawhi Leonard was coming off the bench for the Spurs in that time. So was Manu.
How could you? Richard Jefferson was in his prime.
Yeah.
He was probably, 34?
Probably.
Oh, man.
But yeah, back to LaMarcus Aldridge. I do really really like him in the spot. He's failed to reach the 20-point mark in 4 of his last 5 games, which is interesting. Um, Maybe he's tired. I don't know. Big men with a lot. He's been really really high usage this season. Again, we do have to deal with Popovich being Popovich, so just monitor the news. DeJounte Murray is my guy. Like, I don't care about the price increase. It's up to 5,900. Played 26 minutes against the Kings, 37 fantasy points. Like, this dude has just been absolutely crushing over 30 fantasy points in 3 of the last 4 games. Yeah, against a team that really struggles to defend the rim. Yeah, give me some DeJounte Murray here.
Yeah, I'm with you. He's doing a little bit of everything. He's been rebounding really well. 10, 9, 4, and 10 over his last 4 games. I know they were against some bad rebounding teams, and Denver's a little bit better, but he's doing a little bit of everything. Yeah, I'm with you. Even at that price tag, like he's good to go for me.
Yeah, he's a solid cash game option, and he still has plenty of upside even at that price. So I do love me some DeJounte Murray.
Yep. You going with anyone else here? Kyle Anderson, Pau Gasol.
Anderson's price is back down to where he's a very, very solid option, so you could definitely go there. I like him more in cash games, but he's another guy, has shown rebounding upside at times recently, getting some blocks and steals. He's a fine option. Pau Gasol should play a decent amount of minutes to match up with Nikola Jokic, so he's a cheaper option from that front court. The rest of the guys, though, like the Bryn Forbes, Danny Greens, no, I'm not looking there.
Yeah, if anything does happen, that front court and guys sit, Bertans is always a guy that I'll have some interest in at his price.
Yeah, if someone were to be out, you could definitely go there.
Golden State, Utah. Golden State favored by 8.5 here. I don't like really these guys at their price tags. Like probably Draymond's my favorite because once again he'll get some time in blowouts. Like he's a fair price. Like I don't mind going with the cheaper guys once again, and especially Klay Thompson, given the fact that Utah is allowing a hefty amount of threes.
I think my favorite option here, and he's an excellent pivot off of Harden, Westbrook, and everyone else, is going to be Steph Curry, who is just on a freaking tear recently. Shot 8 of 13 from 3 against Boston, 5 of 9 against Minnesota, 8 of 15 against the Knicks. Like, this dude is shooting the freaking lights out right now against a Utah team that struggles, as you mentioned, to defend the 3-point line, but they really, really struggle against spot-up shooters. And Stephen Curry, second on the team in spot-up efficiency. I do really like Stephen Curry as a tournament pivot. But the rest of the guys, Draymond Green, you mentioned, he's, again, a solid cash game option. Durant and Clay in tournaments, if you want to. I think I would prefer Clay, but it's Stephen Curry and Draymond for me.
Yep. That's about it. I'm not really looking at the bench guys. Just kind of the main studs as usual.
Yep.
On the Utah side, do you have any interest here? I guess if you're expecting this game to stay somewhat close, it's going to have to be Donovan Mitchell and maybe Ricky Rubio.
Mitchell's a fine cash game option. Just not a massive ceiling recently. So I just if you want to roll him out, go for it, especially where his price is starting to decline. Rubio, been over 30 fantasy points in 3 of the last 4 games, 4 of the last 5. The only bad game he had was the Atlanta game where I was all over him. He's 5,200. Price just kind of refuses to come up on DraftKings. 5,100 on FanDuel. That's a really solid price for Rubio here.
Yeah, I definitely like him. I don't have any interest in the front court here. I'm not really looking at Gobert. We've seen some centers play really well against Golden State, but Gobert doesn't really fit the mold of those centers.
Shockingly, I went back and looked. Gobert's been pretty solid against this team, in their playoff series and regular season last year. If you wanted to take a shot on him, go for it. I do really think that Favors at $5K on DraftKings is a very interesting option. I think he's a fine cash game option tonight at a spot where I don't think people are going to really look.
Yeah, probably not in that price back down. Yeah, he's only 5,700 on FanDuel. Who's he on DraftKings?
5,100.
Yeah, that's a nice price for Favors right there. I guess if I'm looking at Utah a little bit more, I think that makes me a little bit more intrigued with Golden State.
Yeah, if you're wanting to get some of this Utah exposure, I would definitely maybe get someone from Golden State.
Anyone else from Utah you want to talk about?
No, I don't. They're just rotating too many bodies at the other positions.
Portland and LA here next. Clippers 219 total. Portland favored by 3. I'll start with this Portland side. Start the back court. I'll never say no to Lillard. Once again, like he's always going to play heavy minutes, but I mean, he's going to be a guy who probably hovers around that 40 fantasy point mark. And at that price, like I'm still going to be looking for a little bit more.
Yeah, I do want to caution against Portland tonight. I don't know if something is in the works or if someone is injured, but they just recalled one of their guards from the G League. They just recalled Wade Baldwin from the G League to the team. It could just be like administrative stuff, or there could be something about to go down. So again, keep an eye on that. But you mentioned Lillard. He's a fine option. I have a hard time believing that the Clippers are going to be able to keep this one very close, but like if you wanted to get some exposure to Lillard, feel free. You mentioned McCollum at 7,100. I do really like the spot for him. And Nurkic in tournaments, and that's pretty much it from the Portland side of things for me.
Yeah, that's about it. I will say Ed Davis on DraftKings, I'm not going to pay $5,200 for him on FanDuel. He's been excellent of late. Over 30 fantasy points in 2 of the last 3. The minutes have been there. We've seen him take minutes away from Nurkic of late. I don't know if that's going to continue. I know there's been a couple of blowouts of late, but Ed Davis has just been playing himself on the floor even more here.
Yeah, that price is really up there, so it does concern me a little bit, but it's a fine spot for him.
Yeah, I mean, we're used to paying like 3.9. 4.4 is not that bad for me, though.
No, it's not, but like there clearly is a path to Ed Davis turning back into a pumpkin and putting up like 10 fantasy points.
For sure. I like the pumpkin reference there. LA, obviously without Blake Griffin, we've been down this road before, but I'm a little cautious with the Clippers, probably just over actually their overall state of mindset. Like, I don't know where they're going to be at tonight.
You're looking at Lou Williams, I think. Like I will say this. Okay. Like I know there's a lot of rumor around Lou Williams and DeAndre Jordan being traded and it probably happening soon. But if Avery Bradley and Tobias Harris are not available, which I do not expect them to be available, they pretty much cannot trade DeAndre and Lou Williams today. Like they have to have, I believe it's 8 players in uniform on the bench. And if those guys are out, like they only have like 5 players available. So like, I don't think those guys get traded today. I love Lou Williams in the spot. We have a very, very small sample size with Rivers and Beverly and Blake and all these people off the floor. It's only like 20 minutes, but 41.5% usage rate. Yeah. That's really high. And Lou Williams, all-star snub, he's still pissed off about that. I think this is a Lou Williams smash spot. So he's the guy that I would have the most exposure to. And if you wanted to get some DeAndre, feel free. We have to talk about Montrezl Harrell. I don't necessarily like playing him when DeAndre is healthy. But as I mentioned, they do not have bodies right now. Like if Danilo Gallinari is ruled out, that leaves him with like 8 players.
He would be he would be 9 if he plays tonight.
Yeah. So like there has to be minutes there for him. Like they're not going to play 45 minutes of DeAndre Jordan. Like there's going to be minutes for Montrezl Harrell against a Portland team that has struggled against post-up players, and that's Montrezl Harrell is an excellent post-up player, as I've alluded to several times in the past. Montrezl Harrell is 4,100 on DraftKings.
Yeah, fire him up. I definitely don't mind. You mentioned Lou, like he's the other guy. I don't have much interest in Wesley Johnson here now that we've named a couple of other small forward options. I think I'd rather go with like a Gerald Green, like a Reggie Bullock.
Yeah, I'd rather those guys than freaking Wesley Johnson. But yeah it's Wes and it's Lou and Harrell for me, maybe a little bit of DeAndre, and then that's it.
Yeah, we've really seen this Portland defense really struggle against guards lately. Like Portland's always been a top defense this year. I haven't been great at targeting them. 22nd in backcourt defensive efficiency over the last 10 games. I don't know if they're just letting the foot off the pedal. Like Lillard got his all-star, and now he's just like, oh, go back to playing casual defense.
That's probably what it is.
So, yeah, fire up some Lou Will, get some exposure. A fun slate, should be extremely high scoring, given all the studs and given all the punt value that has a pretty high ceiling. Like, I would not be shocked to see GPPs like near 400 on FanDuel, like pushing way over 300, 320 on DraftKings tonight.
We say that, and then everyone comes out and flops, and like a winning GPP is 260 points.
And that's where those balanced lineups come in, ladies and gentlemen.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it should be a fun one. Let's go highest score, and I'm not going to put a limit on it just because there's so much going on tonight.
James Harden.
I knew it. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just go Anthony Davis. Real bold shots here.
Hot take city.
Go to dailyfantasycafe.com. Check out the optimizer, Brent's GPP picks, cheat sheets as well. And we'll see you guys tomorrow.
Enjoy the drama.